He knocked on the door before sunrise. That is the detail that stays with you. Not the timeline, not the court documents, not the years of warning signs sitting in files across 6 different institutions. The knock. A man standing at a door in the dark, in a neighborhood where children were still asleep, and knocking like it was a normal morning, like he had not already made a decision that could never be undone. Christina Snow answered that door. She was shot 9 times, and when she was on the floor of her own home, she used Siri on her phone to call 911. That call became the thread that connected everything that followed. And what followed, across the next 68 minutes, across 2 homes, 2 cities, and 8 children who would never see another sunrise, is the story that most coverage of this case never fully told. This is not the version where the timeline ends at the crime scene. This is the version that starts a decade earlier in the same neighborhood with the same man and asks the question nobody in the press coverage was willing to answer directly. How does something like this happen in full view of the systems that are supposed to prevent it, and why did none of them stop it? If you are watching this for the first time, you are in the right place. True Crime Records covers the cases that deserve more than a headline. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because this case is still developing, and every update will be covered here. What you are about to hear is the full account, built from court records, verified family statements, federal documents, and confirmed reporting, and it starts long before Cedar Grove ever made the news. Shreveport, Louisiana, April 19, 2026. By the time most of the residents on West 79th Street were awake, it was already over. 8 children were gone. 2 women had been shot and survived. A man was dead 15 miles away in Bossier City, and a neighborhood that a 71-year-old resident named M. London described as having never seen anything like it in 35 years of living there was sealed off behind police tape before the sun had fully risen. April 19, 2026 became the deadliest mass shooting in the United States in more than 2 years. It became Louisiana's largest mass casualty event since the Bourbon Street attack on New Year's Day 2025. And it did not happen at a school. It did not happen at a concert. It did not happen at a public venue. It happened inside 2 residential homes, in a neighborhood where children played in their front yards and neighbors waved at each other across the street on Saturday afternoons. The day before, April 18th, a man named Freddie Montgomery was walking home from a neighbor's house when he glanced across the street. Shamar Elkins was sitting on his front porch. His children were playing in the yard. Montgomery caught his eye. Both men waved. Montgomery kept walking. That was the last normal moment on that street. 24 hours later, Montgomery opened his curtains and saw law enforcement flooding the block. He went outside. He asked an officer how bad it was. He was told it was bad. He asked about fatalities. Multiple. He asked if children were involved. Multiple. 8 children gone before sunrise. And the man responsible had been sitting on that porch the afternoon before, watching them play. Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry addressed the public plainly in the aftermath. No softening. No careful language. He stated that what happened on April 19th was not a fit of rage. It did not happen in one moment when something snapped. It was systematic. And to understand what that word actually means in the context of this case, you have to go back to the very beginning. Not to that Saturday afternoon, not to that Sunday morning, to the very beginning of Shamar Dwan Elkins. Shamar Dwan Elkins was born December 7, 1994, in Shreveport, Louisiana. He never left. Cedar Grove was where he was born, where he grew up, and where this case ends. His biological mother, Mahalia, was a teenager when he was born, battling a crack cocaine addiction she could not overcome. She could not raise him. A family friend named Betty Walker stepped in and became the woman who actually raised him. The adult who showed up when his mother could not. Mahalia and Shamar eventually reconnected in the mid-2010s, but by then he was already a grown man, already a soldier, already building the life this case is about. By the time mother and son found each other again, the boy had already become whoever he was going to be. In August 2013, at 18 years old, Elkins enlisted in the Louisiana Army National Guard. He served 7 years as a signal support systems specialist and a fire support specialist. Those are not desk roles. Those are positions involving weapons systems, coordinating firepower under pressure, and maintaining composure when everything around you is collapsing. He was trained deliberately and professionally to stay calm when everything inside him was falling apart, to manage how crisis appeared on the outside regardless of what was happening within. 7 years of that conditioning, built into the way he moved through the world, the way he presented to the people around him, the way he managed what anyone outside could see. He left in August 2020 as a private, the lowest enlisted rank, after 7 full years of service. That detail matters more than most coverage acknowledged. 7 years in a role involving weapon systems and coordinated firepower, and he left at the same rank he entered. No advancement across a 7-year span is an anomaly in any military record. And when he walked out, there was no documented transition support back into civilian life, no reintegration program, no framework for what normal was supposed to look like without the uniform. He just came home. The conditioning stayed. Everything else was gone. He took a job at UPS. His coworker Willie Vasher described him publicly as a devoted family man, present and dependable. But Vasher noticed something he could not explain away. Elkins had a bald spot, not from age, not from genetics, from pulling his own hair out strand by strand throughout his shifts, every single day, under the weight of whatever he was carrying. That behavior, visible to everyone around him, is clinically associated with chronic, unmanaged stress and anxiety. It is the kind of behavior a person develops when the internal pressure has nowhere else to go, and nobody who saw it every day asked what it meant. That bald spot was not a minor physical detail. That was a man communicating in the only visible language available to him that something inside was not right, and the world looked right past it. Now consider what his daily life actually looked like. 2 households, 2 separate sets of children, 1 UPS salary covering all of it, a rental home on West 79th Street owned by Pastor Marty T. Johnson, senior pastor of the nearby St. Gabriel Community Baptist Church, rented through someone who worked for him. The pastor later confirmed he had never had any direct dealings with the family. This was a man carrying a structural financial load with no relief valve, holding every visible sign of stress completely inside, exactly the way 7 years of military conditioning had trained him to. The pressure was constant. It was physical. It was right there on the surface, and nobody was paying attention. Shamar Elkins was not living one family life. He was running 2 simultaneously. And the roots of that situation stretch back much further than most coverage of this case ever acknowledged. Christina Snow was his ex-wife, not his girlfriend, as early reporting incorrectly stated. That distinction matters because it changes the picture of what was truly at stake on April 19th. Their relationship dates to at least 2013. Christina gave birth to their daughter Sarah that year. Then, in 2016, Louisiana's Department of Children and Family Services filed a lawsuit in Caddo Parish, stating that Elkins had neglected his daughter Sarah Renee Snow and asking a judge to legally compel child support payments. The state's own child welfare agency had him on record for neglecting his child years before April 19th. That case sat in a file, disconnected from everything that followed. In September 2017, a judge granted joint custody following a formal paternity and child support petition. Court involvement, signed orders, and still nothing in that record connected to anything else that was building around the same man at the same time. Christina Snow's own public Facebook history tells a story that begins in 2015. Posts expressing distress about the relationship. Posts about his behavior toward other women. In December 2016, she wrote publicly that she wished she had never met Shamar Elkins. A decade of documented dysfunction sitting in plain view online, never assembled into a pattern by anyone with the authority to act on it. Then there was Shaniqua Pugh. Elkins married Shaniqua in April 2024. Together, they had 4 children. They lived at the rental home on West 79th Street. From the outside, from the neighbors, from the people who waved at him across the street, they looked like a family. Her uncle Lionel Pugh spoke about her after April 19th. He described Shaniqua as a mother who raised those children right, and said that her children were the center of her entire world. She was not simply a name in a police report. She was a woman who had built her entire life around those kids. Betty Walker confirmed that inside the marriage, both Elkins and Shaniqua had accused each other of infidelity at different points, and that financial strain was a significant and constant tension between them. Then, in 2023, before the wedding had even taken place, Shaniqua considered leaving him. Elkins told her directly what would happen if she followed through. He told her he would end the lives of her, their children, and himself. Walker later told the New York Times that when Elkins said it, he walked it back and claimed he was joking. She believed him. She told the newspaper she never thought, and nobody ever told her, that he would actually follow through on that threat against his own family. Shaniqua stayed. They married in April 2024. That threat did not disappear when she said yes. It sat inside the relationship quietly for 3 full years, until the moment Shaniqua filed for divorce citing infidelity. Troy Brown, Elkins' own brother-in-law, confirmed the divorce filing directly to CNN. The April 20th court date was set. The marriage that had carried a 3-year-old death threat inside it was now less than 24 hours from legal dissolution, and Elkins knew it. Before this account goes any further, there is something worth naming clearly. What happened on April 19th caused the loss of young lives. It involves documented domestic violence and a mental health crisis that was visible across multiple institutions simultaneously. If anything in this story is bringing something up about yourself or someone you know, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available by call or text at any time, and the National Domestic Violence Hotline can be reached 24 hours a day. No crisis is required to reach out. These resources exist for exactly the moments when everything feels like it is closing in. In the weeks before April 19th, Shamar Elkins was leaving a public record of exactly where his mind was going. January 2026, 3 months before the shooting, Elkins checked himself into a Veterans Affairs hospital voluntarily. Troy Brown confirmed this to the Associated Press. The stay lasted just over a week. He came home. His family described him with one word: happy. But this was a man with 7 years of military training in managing how crisis appeared on the outside. Presenting as stable after a hospital stay does not mean the crisis was resolved. It may simply mean he was trained to manage exactly how crisis appeared to the people around him. Happy is not healed. Happy is a face. And Troy Brown was watching closely enough to know the difference, trying every single day to keep Elkins grounded. He told CNN he constantly initiated conversation and activity, suggesting they sit outside, play dominoes, play cards, go for walks. He asked Elkins directly whether he needed to return to the hospital. Elkins told him he was going to deal with it on his own. Those words, said in the weeks before April 19th, carry a weight that is impossible to fully measure when looked at from the other side of what happened. February 2026. Betty Walker confirmed to the New York Times that Elkins made an attempt on his own life that month. Additional VA counseling and medication management followed. He was discharged again, back into the same household, the same failing marriage, the same financial pressure. No coordinated follow-up between the VA and any other institution. No communication between the system that held his mental health file and the court system that held his weapons conviction, or the police department that already had his name in their records, or the family members who were watching him unravel in real time. Then came the social media trail. On March 8, 2026, 6 weeks before the shooting, Elkins reshared a Facebook post asking fathers whether they would have children again with a different woman. He responded publicly that he absolutely would. A man mentally detaching from both families he was maintaining in public, where anyone who knew him could see it. The post stayed up. Nobody who read it connected it to what it was. April 9th, 2026. 10 days before the shooting, he reposted a poem addressed to God, asking for help managing his mind and his emotions, asking for strength to reject negativity in the name of his faith. Not a post about gratitude, a public cry for help, managing thoughts he could not control on his own. 10 days before April 19th, in plain view, and nobody who read it recognized it as the signal it was. Easter Sunday, April 5th, 2026. He posted a photo with 7 of his children and described attending church together for the first time with all of his kids as a wonderful and blessed day. That same day, he called his mother and his stepfather, Marcus Jackson, in tears, telling them that Shaniqua had filed for divorce and that he was overwhelmed by dark thoughts. 2 versions of the same man, One visible to the world through a photograph of a church morning, one only his family could hear through a phone line. His stepfather tried to reassure him. Elkins responded with words that have stayed with that family from that moment forward. He told them that some people simply do not come back from their demons. The call ended. No crisis line was contacted. No welfare check was requested. And most families in that moment do exactly what this family did. Because most of the time, that call does not end the way this one did. 2 days before the shooting, he posted a photo of his eldest daughter at dinner, just the two of them. The last public image of her he would ever share. Those posts are not random. The March post shows a man detaching. The April 9th post shows a man losing the internal battle he had been fighting quietly for years. The Easter photo shows a man still performing the role of father while simultaneously calling his parents to say he could not hold back the darkness. The dinner photo was the last time any of it was visible. These were not the posts of a man who had decided. They were the posts of a man still fighting the pull toward a decision, losing that fight in public where anyone could have seen it, and nobody connected the picture. The VA had his mental health file. The courts had his weapons conviction. The police had his name in their system. The Child Welfare Agency had his name from 2016. Not one of those institutions was communicating with any of the others about the same man at the same time. Every institution held a piece. None of them held the full picture. And in March 2026, just weeks before April 19th, the Shreveport City Council voted to withdraw from a partnership with the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office to operate a domestic violence resource center. The center that was supposed to exist for exactly this kind of situation was gone before Shaniqua Pugh ever needed it. City Council member Tabitha Taylor told CNN that domestic violence accounts for 30% of all homicides in Shreveport, with African American women carrying that weight most heavily. Caddo Parish Sheriff Henry Whitehorn stated publicly that the community could not afford to treat domestic violence as an afterthought and that every victim deserved access to safety. Those words were said after April 19th. The resource center was gone before it. In the final days before the shooting, Troy Brown was watching a man he no longer fully recognized. Not angry, not hostile, desperate. Brown told reporters that Elkins kept repeating the same words over and over, expressing that he could not bear the thought of losing his wife in a way Brown described as unlike anything he had ever heard from him across all their years together. Crystal Brown, a cousin of one of the injured women, confirmed to the Associated Press that Elkins and Shaniqua had been actively arguing about the separation in the days before the shooting. The tension was not quiet. It was building. The April 20th court date was sitting over everything like a clock that could not be stopped. Retired FBI supervisory agent Jason Pack analyzed this case publicly and put a name to what the evidence showed. Cases like this follow a pathway to violence, not a snap decision, but a process. A specific grievance builds until it becomes the center of everything the person thinks about. There is no room left for anything else. The divorce was the exact trigger Elkins had named in 2023. The court date was the fixed point on that pathway. And there is one detail that almost no coverage reported. According to a since-deleted Facebook post by Michael Mayans, Elkins's former commanding officer in the Louisiana National Guard, Mayans had spoken with Elkins about the possible divorce the day before the shooting. The man Elkins would later drive 15 miles to find in his final hours had a conversation with him about the exact thing destroying him 24 hours before April 19th. That detail reframes everything that came after. That evening, April 18th, Elkins took his eldest daughter to dinner, just the two of them. He posted a photo online. He came home. Troy Brown left for work at 9 p.m. Elkins was calm. Brown walked out the door. Elkins stayed inside. What happened between 9 p.m. Saturday and sunrise Sunday has not been fully reconstructed. What is confirmed is that by the time Cedar Grove began to stir, Elkins had already left the house. The decision had already been made. Governor Landry stated clearly that it was not a fit of rage and did not happen in a single uncontrolled moment. Shreveport Police Chief Wayne Smith described it publicly as a 68-minute sequence across 4 crime scenes and 2 cities. If you have followed this story from the beginning and you want to be here when every new development breaks, make sure you are subscribed to True Crime Records right now. This case is still active, and this channel covers every update as it surfaces. hit the subscribe button. Turn on notifications. There are people watching from places that would genuinely surprise you, and that matters more than you might think. 5 o'clock in the morning, Harrison Street, Cedar Grove, Shreveport. 1 block from West 79th Street, Elkins arrived at the home of Christina Snow, his ex-wife. He knocked before sunrise. She answered. He opened fire. Christina was struck 9 times. She survived. After being shot 9 times at her own front door, she used Siri on her phone to call 911. Her aunt, LaShawn Berry, confirmed this to CNN. That call became the investigative link connecting both locations for detectives. Elkins then took Christina's 3 children and drove to West 79th Street, where Shaniqua and the other children were asleep. At West 79th Street, Shaniqua was shot multiple times. She survived by reaching a neighbor's house and calling 911 from there. Her uncle Lionel Pugh told reporters that Shaniqua described herself as running for her life, and that the only people who survived were the ones who managed to get out. Kosha Pugh, Shaniqua's sister, and her 12-year-old daughter escaped to the roof and jumped. Both survived. Kosha called a family member while it was still happening and told them that the children had been shot and that he had taken their lives. 7 children were found inside the home. 1 was found on the back roof, having attempted to escape. A 9th child survived jumping from the roof with broken bones. 2 houses down, neighbor Liza Deming's security camera captured Elkins leaving the property, running, with 2 gunshots audible on the footage. Deming later told reporters she saw him running out of the house before the cars left, and that when she went outside, she saw a covered child on the roof of the home. That image, what Deming saw when she stepped outside that morning, is the weight of April 19th made visible in a single still frame. At 6:15 a.m., Elkins took a red Kia Sportage at gunpoint near Linwood Avenue. Officers tracked it south on Interstate 49. By 6:18 a.m., it was crossing the Red River Bridge into Bossier City, 15 miles from Cedar Grove. And here is the detail that almost no outlet properly reported. Elkins did not drive randomly. He did not head for the highway out of state. He did not go into hiding. He drove directly to the home of Michael Mayans, his former commanding officer in the Louisiana National Guard. In his since-deleted Facebook post, Mayans wrote that when his security cameras activated and he heard a familiar voice at his door, he opened it without knowing what had happened that morning. He wrote that Elkins had come to him seeking the safety and security he had always associated with Mayans as a trusted figure and mentor from his military years. Think about what that means. After 68 minutes, after 2 homes, after 2 women shot, after 8 children, after all of it, the one place his mind reached for was the man who had represented structure and safety from the years when his life had a framework around it. The military had given him a role, a rank, a commanding officer, a reason to present as composed and functional. When everything else collapsed, his mind went back to the last place that had felt like solid ground. As officers arrived at the Brampton Lane address in Bossier City, Elkins reportedly took his own life with a carbine he was carrying. Louisiana State Police are still formally investigating the cause of death in those final moments. At 7:03 a.m., Shamar Elkins was pronounced dead. Louisiana State Representative Tammy Phelps stood at the West 79th Street scene and told reporters she could not begin to imagine what the officers and first responders had faced when they arrived at that location. The Caddo Parish Coroner's Office ordered autopsies for all 8 children. Now consider the firearm. Shamar Elkins should not have been able to touch one, that is, Louisiana law and federal law simultaneously. His 2019 weapons conviction carried a mandatory 10-year firearms prohibition. He was legally barred from possessing any weapon until 2029. That determination was made by a court, put in writing, and placed in his permanent record. The system had already made that call years before April 19th. So how did he get one? The ATF and Shreveport police traced the Mossberg pistol used that morning to a 56-year-old Shreveport man named Charles Ford. The chain of possession, per federal court documents, worked like this. A woman legally purchased the firearm and gave it to Ford, himself a convicted felon, to hold while she was hospitalized. Ford kept it under the seat of his truck. He later told investigators he believed Elkins had taken it from him. When ATF agents first interviewed Ford, he denied ever having the weapon at all. He later reversed that account entirely and admitted possessing it. That reversal became his second federal charge. Ford was arrested on April 21, 2026. 2 days after the shooting, he faces up to 15 years for the possession charge and up to 5 years for making a false statement to federal investigators. Combined, that is up to 20 years in federal prison. Mayor Arsenault reviewed a photograph of the weapon and described it publicly as appearing to be part handgun and part sawed-off shotgun. ATF Special Agent in Charge Joshua Jackson stated publicly that holding people accountable extends beyond the person who pulled the trigger and includes everyone who gave access to the firearm that was later used to cause harm in the community. 3 hands touched that weapon before it reached Cedar Grove. 3 hands, 1 weapon. And the prohibition that should have prevented all of it was sitting in a court record that nobody with access to the gun ever checked. Now consider the complete picture. Not a single institutional failure. A series of them, connected, sequential, and collectively devastating in a way that no individual failure fully captures on its own. In 2016, the child welfare system had his name on a neglect case involving his own daughter. In 2019, the court system processed his guilty plea on a weapons charge and attached a 10-year firearms prohibition to his record without confiscating a weapon. In August 2020, the National Guard discharged him from 7 years of service with no documented reintegration support. In 2023, a direct death threat was made against his wife and children and never formally reported to any authority. In January 2026, the Veterans Affairs System admitted him for mental health treatment and discharged him back into an active crisis environment without coordinated follow-up. In February 2026, he survived a suicide attempt, received additional VA treatment, and was discharged again into the same household with the same pressures and no cross-institutional communication. In the weeks before April 19th, his brother-in-law was actively trying to keep him stable inside the same house every single day. The Shreveport Police Department confirmed his name was already in their system before that Sunday morning. And in March 2026, the City Council terminated the Domestic Violence Resource Center partnership. 6 institutions. 6 documented contact points with the same man across a decade. Not one communicating with any other. Pennsylvania State University professor Catherine Spearman, who researches domestic violence and child abuse, analyzed this case directly and concluded that systems must learn to recognize these patterns as risk factors before tragedies occur. Not after, not in hindsight, but while the pattern is still forming, while there is still time to act. The pattern was documented. It was visible across multiple institutions simultaneously. It was never assembled into a complete picture by anyone with the authority to do something about it. Louisiana State Senator Sam Jenkins expressed public concern that people with documented histories of domestic violence were not being tracked closely enough or offered the treatment that might prevent situations like this from escalating. Caddo. Parish Sheriff Henry Whitehorn stated that every victim deserved access to safety and that the community could not afford to treat this as an afterthought. Those statements carry a different weight when the resource center that was supposed to serve that function had just been removed from existence. The question this case leaves behind is not whether the system failed. The record is clear on that. The question is, which specific door, opened differently, changes how April 19th ends. The 2016 neglect case handled differently. The 2019 conviction paired with actual firearm confiscation. The 2023 threat formally reported. The VA discharge coordinated with other institutions holding his file. The Domestic Violence Resource Center still in operation in March 2026. Any one of those doors opened differently may have changed the outcome. None of them were. There is only one way to end a case like this. With the children. With their names. With who they actually were. The Caddo Parish Coroner's Office identified all 8 children. Their names were read into the public record on April 20th, 2026, by Councilman James Green, who stood outside that house on West 79th Street and told the community that the moment called for pausing to honor the lives that had been lost and the families that had been changed forever. Jayla Elkins, 3 years old. Shayla Elkins, 5 years old. Brillan Snow, 5 years old. Caleb Pugh, 6 years old. Kadarian Snow, 6 years old. Leah Pugh, 7 years old. Marcombe Pugh, 10 years old. Sarah Snow, 11 years old. 5 girls, 3 boys. The youngest was 3, the oldest was 11. 7 of them were Shamar Elkins's own children, and one of them, Marcone Pugh, was the son of Troy Brown, Elkins's own brother-in-law, the man who had been trying every single day to keep Elkins alive, the boy who had lived in that house, the boy Brown had helped raise. Troy Brown spoke publicly after April 19th. He said he would never get to throw a football with his son again. And then he said something that has barely been reported anywhere, something that carries more weight than any timeline or court document in this entire case. He said he would never again hear his son ask him for a bag of chips. That moment, that specific, ordinary, irreplaceable moment. A 10-year-old boy asking his father for something small, something that would have happened 100 more times across 100 more ordinary evenings. A moment that will never happen now. These 8 losses more than doubled Shreveport and Caddo Parish's total homicide count for the entire year in a single morning. Governor Landry's Love, One Louisiana Foundation covered all funeral costs. The Community Foundation of North Louisiana launched dedicated survivor funds. Hundreds gathered for a candlelight vigil on the evening of April 20th. Mourners laid flowers outside the single-story house on West 79th Street. Community advocate Kimberlyn Jackson stood at that vigil and told those around her that moments like this remind people to hold their children close and to tell them how much they are loved. Because life offers no guarantees. The following morning, Caddo Parish School Superintendent Keith Burton described what he witnessed at one of the schools the children had attended. A kindergarten classmate of one of the victims walked silently down the hallway. She said nothing to anyone. She walked into the counseling room, found a counselor, and put her head on their shoulder and cried. No words, no framework for what had happened. She just knew something was gone and walked toward the nearest person who felt safe. That image is what April 19th, 2026 actually cost. Not the timeline, not the federal charges, not the court documents or the press conferences. A kindergarten child who could not find words for what she was carrying and walked toward the nearest safe person in silence. M. London, 35 years on West 79th Street, stepped outside that Sunday morning to close his gate and found his block sealed off by law enforcement. He told reporters that nothing like this had ever happened on that street, that it was bad, and that he hated it had to happen to those kids. 35 years on one street, and the worst morning of his life was the one where his neighbor's children did not survive to see another week. The ATF investigation into the firearm chain remains active. Charles Ford's federal case is ongoing. Louisiana State Police have not closed their inquiry into the final moments on Brampton Lane in Bossier City. There are answers still outstanding. Questions about the systems that failed across this decade that still have no public answer. Questions about what coordinated intervention might have looked like if a single institution had picked up the phone and called another. This case is not closed, and every development will be covered here on True Crime Records. If this account gave you something to think about, share it. The people who need to understand what this case actually represents exist in every country, every city, every neighborhood. Share it with someone who should know this story. Leave a comment with a part of this case that deserves more attention than it has received. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now, because the next update on this case should not be something you have to go searching for. True Crime Records is where this story continues. If you or someone you know is facing a mental health crisis, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available by call or text at any time, completely free. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day. Jayla, Shayla, Brillen, Caleb, Kadarian, Leah, Marcone, Sarah. 8 names, 8 children who deserved every single year that was taken from them. 8 children who played in a front yard on a Saturday afternoon while a neighbor waved from across the street and everything still looked like it was going to be fine. 8 children who went to sleep that night and did not know it was the last time they ever would. The knock came before sunrise, and nothing about that street or that neighborhood or the families who lived there will ever be the same again.